The sound of the door slamming echoed through the hallway, drowning out the voice that had always held so much weight in my life. I felt my chest tighten as the last words my mother had spoken rang in my ears. "You're worthless without us, Emma. You'll never make it on your own. We've given you everything." I wasn't sure which part of her words stung more. The accusation that I was nothing without the family that had always been my cage, or the fact that it had come from the one person who was supposed to love me unconditionally, the mother who had built me up for years, only to tear me down in an instant. I took a breath, inhaling the familiar scent of jasmine and lavender that filled the grand foyer of our house. A scent that had once made me feel safe, secure, like I belonged. But tonight it felt suffocating. The house, the mansion really, seemed to tower over me, the walls closing in. I had spent my entire life in its shadow, surrounded by riches and luxuries, but also by a constant reminder that I was not enough, not beautiful enough, not smart enough, not accomplished enough. I wasn't anything unless I was part of the family. My name is Emma Carrington, and for as long as I could remember, I had lived under the weight of my last name. The Carrington name came with privileges, too many privileges maybe, but it also came with expectations. Expectations that I would behave, dress, speak, and even think a certain way. My entire life had been scripted for me. I was the youngest child, the quiet one. The one who was supposed to be the perfect daughter to uphold the Carrington legacy. My older brothers, Gregory and Michael, were always the stars of the show. They were the ones who inherited the business and the fortune. The ones who had been groomed to take on the mantle of power. I was the one who was supposed to follow the rules, stay in line, and never deviate from the path laid out for me. But all that changed that night. The night I had left the dinner table after hearing my mother's cruel words. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. It was clear, I was nothing more than a burden to them. I had one choice, to walk away and never look back, or stay and keep proving them right. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The anger and the hurt boiled inside me. But it wasn't just anger anymore. It was something else. A quiet resolve. A determination I had never known I had. I looked at my reflection in the glass windows of my room. The reflection staring back at me was a stranger. She had been hiding for too long, shy, obedient, and completely unaware of her own potential. But not anymore. I had spent my life trying to fit into a mold that was never mine. It was time to shatter that mold. By morning, I had made a decision. I packed a small suitcase with the essentials, left a note for my parents, and walked out of the Carrington estate for the last time. My life as Emma Carrington was over. What came next I had no idea. But I knew one thing, I would no longer define myself by their standards. I wasn't sure where I was going or how I would survive. But I knew I couldn't stay in that suffocating cage any longer. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally free to be myself. The outside world, with all its noise and chaos, felt overwhelming. But also exhilarating. I was alone, but for the first time I wasn't lonely. I was free to make my own choices. To build something entirely new from scratch. As I stood on the busy sidewalk, the city stretching out before me, I felt a rush of excitement I had never known. The life I had known, the privileges, the wealth, the constant gaze of expectation, was behind me. What lay ahead was a blank slate, one that I could fill with my own dreams, my own goals, and my own identity. The first few weeks were difficult. I had no idea how to navigate the world outside the Carrington estate. I found a small apartment in a modest neighborhood, something far from the luxurious penthouses I had once known. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. I found a job working at a local cafe, a far cry from the positions I was expected to take in the family business, but there was something about the simplicity of the work, the constant hum of conversation, and the satisfaction of earning my own paycheck, that filled me with a quiet pride. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. I had spent my entire life being told what I was worth, how much I could achieve, how much I could contribute. It was time to prove that I was worth more than anyone could imagine. I started taking business courses online, learning everything I could about marketing, management, and entrepreneurship. I spent hours after work reading, studying, and strategizing. One night, as I was walking home from work, I stumbled upon a small art gallery. It was a modest place, tucked away on a quiet street. But there was something about it that caught my eye. Inside, I found walls filled with vibrant paintings, each one telling a unique story. I stopped in my tracks. There was a painting that spoke to me, a canvas of bright, bold colors, chaos and beauty all intertwined. It felt like it was speaking directly to me, as though it was telling me that I too could create something beautiful from the chaos of my life. The gallery owner, an older woman named Margaret, noticed my fascination with the painting. She came over and introduced herself, and we struck up a conversation. I shared my story with her and she listened attentively, offering kind words of encouragement. "Sometimes," she said, "the world doesn't tell us what we're truly capable of. But that doesn't mean we can't find our own path. Sometimes, the chaos is what leads us to our true purpose." Her words stayed with me, and I realized something. I had always been chasing someone else's dream. Now, it was time to create my own. It took months of hard work, sacrifice, and sleepless nights. But eventually, I built my own company. I started a consulting business, helping local entrepreneurs and small business owners find their footing. My reputation grew, and word of mouth spread like wildfire. But success didn't come without its challenges. Every time I hit a new milestone, I was met with resistance. My parents never stopped trying to pull me back into their world, calling me, sending letters, trying to convince me that my life outside of their control was a mistake. "You'll always be nothing without us, Emma," my mother's voice echoed in my mind. "You need us." But I didn't need them. I was building my own empire now, and it was worth more than they could ever imagine. I learned to trust myself, to follow my own instincts, and to refuse to be tied down by the expectations others had for me. Slowly, I started seeing my dreams take shape. My small company began to flourish. The clients who once doubted me came to admire my work. I wasn't the little girl anymore, the one they saw as incapable. I was a force to be reckoned with. Years passed, and I continued to grow, both personally and professionally. My consulting business expanded, I hired my first team, and eventually, I became known as a leading entrepreneur in the city. But I knew this wasn't just about business. It was about showing everyone, including myself, that I was worth more than they had ever imagined. Then one day, my mother reached out again. She wanted to meet. I walked into the restaurant where we were meeting, my heart steady, my mind clear. She looked at me from across the table, and for the first time, I saw her as she truly was. Not the woman who had controlled me, but a woman who had underestimated me. "You've done well," she said, her voice tinged with reluctant admiration. "I didn't need your approval," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I did this on my own. And I'm worth more than you could ever imagine." For the first time, I saw her pause, and for a brief moment, I saw the regret in her eyes. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It wasn't about proving something to her. It was about realizing my own worth. I had found my own value, and no one would ever take that away from me again. The days stretched on, filled with early mornings and late nights. I could feel the weight of success settling on my shoulders like a heavy cloak. For all the accolades, all the growth of my business, there were moments when the pressure seemed to buckle my resolve. I had reached a point in my life where nothing was guaranteed. The competition was fierce, the stakes were high, and every decision felt as though it could make or break me. Yet, there was a satisfaction in that tension, in the uncertainty, in the constant pulsating rhythm of having to prove myself every day. I wasn't used to this feeling, no one ever expected me to struggle. Growing up in the Carrington family, everything had been laid out for me. I was born into comfort and security. But now, I had to fight for every inch of progress, every client, every opportunity. It was a different kind of strength, one I had never known before. But the satisfaction was unparalleled. I had learned early on that to survive in the cutthroat world of business, I had to be sharp, both in mind and in character. My company, once a small consulting firm, was now an empire in its own right. I had hired a team, expanded my offerings, and started to gain recognition among the city's elite. My name was becoming synonymous with success, and my reputation was growing, largely because of my ruthless efficiency and relentless pursuit of excellence. But success, as I quickly learned, was a double-edged sword. As I stood in front of my office window one rainy evening, watching the streets below blur with raindrops, I couldn't shake the feeling that the more I gained, the more I lost. There were nights when I would go to bed feeling both accomplished and hollow. The achievement didn't fill the space inside me, the space that had been left behind when I walked away from my family. In those quiet moments, I allowed myself to reflect. I remembered the way my father's voice used to echo in the halls of Carrington Manor, reminding me to keep my place. The way my mother's gaze would flit over me, always critical, always expectant, the suffocating love they had tried to drape over me, all while controlling every part of my life. I had fought for years against their expectations, their imposed vision for my future. And now that I had forged my own path, I realized something: I was still seeking their approval. It wasn't as simple as walking away and never looking back. There were moments when I found myself yearning for their recognition, their validation, even as I stood on my own 2 feet. But each time that yearning surfaced, I squashed it down. I had to remind myself that I was no longer a child seeking approval. I was a woman who had built something extraordinary, who had fought for every step she took. I had created my own empire, and it was time to remember that it was mine, not theirs. Just as I was starting to gain some semblance of control over my internal struggles, an opportunity arrived that would change everything. It came in the form of a phone call from an old colleague, Evelyn Trent. She had been one of the few people I trusted in the business world, someone who had respected my intellect and work ethic long before I built my empire. She had left a high-profile position in one of the city's largest firms to start her own venture. And now she was asking for my help. "Emma, I need you to meet someone. This could be the biggest deal of your career," she said, her voice tinged with excitement. "We're talking global expansion, access to markets you've only dreamed about. But we need your expertise, we need you." Her words, though flattering, didn't fully convey the weight of what she was offering. This wasn't just any deal. This was a partnership with some of the largest players in the international business scene. A partnership that could elevate me, my company, and my brand, to unimaginable heights. As much as I had grown, as much as I had become a force to be reckoned with, I couldn't deny that the idea of becoming part of something bigger, something global, intrigued me. The chance to expand beyond the borders of my small city, to play in the league of the powerful and the influential, was tempting. But it wasn't the business opportunities that caught my attention. It was something else, the power that came with such a deal. The influence, the reach, the ability to make decisions that could reshape entire industries. The very thing my family had always taken for granted. And so, I agreed to meet Evelyn. The decision was made, and with it came an excitement that matched the storm swirling in my chest. This wasn't just another deal. This was the beginning of something that would redefine me, my company, and my place in the world. The day of the meeting arrived with the weight of something monumental hanging in the air. I had carefully planned every detail, worn my most authoritative suit, and prepared my talking points with precision. When I walked into the glass-walled conference room, I was ready. Evelyn stood beside a tall, broad-shouldered man, with a presence so commanding that the room seemed to shrink around him. His eyes were dark and sharp, studying me with a sense of measured curiosity. I could tell immediately that this man was no ordinary business partner. His posture, the way he carried himself, it was clear that he had built his own empire. But there was something else about him, something deeper, something that hinted at the complexities of the power he wielded. "Emma, I'd like you to meet Alexander Rourke," Evelyn introduced him, her voice filled with both admiration and respect. "He's the one who's been looking at expanding his company into the territories we've discussed. And I think the two of you will make an excellent team." I extended my hand, but as I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that this meeting was more than just business. Alexander Rourke wasn't just a businessman, he was a player. A power broker who understood the intricacies of both wealth and influence. I could sense it in the way he shook my hand. The firmness of his grip. The way his gaze lingered just a moment too long. "Emma," he said, his voice low and rich. "I've heard a great deal about you. Your reputation precedes you." The compliment was professional, but there was an edge to it, a hint of something more. I met his gaze, steady and unwavering. This wasn't just a business deal. This was a chance to finally have the kind of power I had always craved, the kind that would make my name synonymous with success and influence. We spent hours discussing strategies, projections, and partnerships. But throughout the meeting, my mind kept returning to one thought: Alexander Rourke. He was charismatic, ambitious, and unafraid to challenge the status quo. And, for reasons I couldn't entirely explain, I found myself drawn to him, not just professionally, but personally. After the meeting, Evelyn pulled me aside. "Be careful with him," she said quietly. "Rourke is known for making powerful allies, but his loyalties are always in question. He's not someone you want to cross, Emma. But if you can keep him on your side, this deal could change everything for you." Her words rang in my ears, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. This deal wasn't just about money or markets, it was about influence, and Alexander Rourke was a man who knew how to wield that influence. I would have to tread carefully. But there was no denying that this was a pivotal moment in my career. The next few days were a blur of preparation, numbers, and strategy sessions. But it wasn't until I received a late-night call from Alexander himself that I realized how high the stakes truly were. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth as velvet, "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I think we have a real opportunity here, but I need someone who's not just a player in this game. I need someone who understands the rules and knows how to make them work in their favor. I need you." His words hung in the air like a challenge, and though I wanted to say no, though I wanted to keep my distance, I knew I had no choice. This was the break I had been waiting for. This was the chance to step into a world of power that could reshape my entire future. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. "Good," he replied, a hint of satisfaction in his tone. "Let's make history together." The days following my decision to enter into a partnership with Alexander Rourke were a whirlwind of activity. Every meeting, every conference call, every business negotiation felt like a step into a new world. One I had only imagined in my wildest dreams. The deals we were working on were monumental. They had the potential to expand my consulting firm into international markets, allowing me to build the kind of influence and power I had once only dreamed of. But there was something else in the air. Something I couldn't quite shake. It was late one night when I finally allowed myself to process what had been building inside me. I sat in my office, a half-finished glass of wine in front of me, as the city lights twinkled outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of my high-rise apartment. The skyline stretched before me like a map of my future. It was beautiful, yes, but it also felt isolating. Cold. I had worked so hard for this moment, but I couldn't ignore the growing sense of unease that gnawed at my stomach. Alexander's presence in my life had become more than just professional. His eyes, those dark, calculating eyes, haunted my thoughts long after the meetings had ended. There was something magnetic about him, something dangerous. He wasn't just a businessman. He was a strategist, a man who wielded influence like a weapon. He saw opportunities where others saw obstacles, and his confidence in his own abilities was contagious. But I couldn't allow myself to be blinded by him. I couldn't afford to get too close, to lose myself in the power game we were playing. I had spent too long building my own empire, too long fighting against the Carrington legacy, to let anyone control me again. But the truth was undeniable. His power was intoxicating. And I couldn't help but wonder, in the quiet moments when the world felt distant and unreachable, if this was what I had been searching for all along. A chance to finally step into a world where I was the one in control. A chance to claim my rightful place in the world of power and influence. The phone rang, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was Evelyn. "Emma, I think it's time we talk about the next steps," she said, her voice tense. "I'm hearing things, rumors mostly. They're saying Alexander's interested in more than just a partnership." I sat up straight, my heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" "Don't play coy," Evelyn replied. "I've seen the way he looks at you. There's more at stake here than just business. I know you're focused on the deal, but you need to understand the risks. Alexander Rourke doesn't do anything without a bigger plan, and you've become part of that plan." I swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking in. Could it be true? Was this truly about business, or was I just another piece in a much larger game? Alexander had always kept his cards close to his chest. I had assumed it was because of the nature of the business, but now as I thought about it, I realized that I might have been blind to the way he had been pulling the strings all along. "I'll handle it," I said, trying to hide the unease in my voice. "I'm not some naive little girl, Evelyn. I know what I'm doing." There was a long pause before she responded. Just remember, Emma, power comes with a price. And sometimes, that price is higher than you're willing to pay. I didn't know what had changed between me and Alexander. But something had shifted. The meetings that had once been strictly professional began to take on a different tone. His glances were longer, more intense. The small touches, just the briefest brushes of fingers when we exchanged documents, or his hand on my shoulder when we were discussing strategy, didn't go unnoticed. At first, I told myself it was just part of the power dynamic. Men like Alexander didn't keep their distance. They were used to commanding attention. And I had to admit, on some level, I enjoyed the attention. There was something intoxicating about being the one who held his focus, who could match his sharp intellect with my own. But the tension continued to build. The flirtation was subtle at first. A comment here, a shared joke there. A lingering glance that seemed to say more than words ever could. But I couldn't afford to get caught up in this. I had worked too hard to build this life, to claim my place in the business world. A relationship with Alexander, no matter how tempting, could ruin everything I had fought for. Then came the day that I realized just how deep I was already entangled in his web. It was a late afternoon when I arrived at his office for a meeting. Alexander was standing by the window, his back to me as he looked out at the city skyline, his profile silhouetted against the fading sunlight. "I was wondering when you would show up," he said without turning around. "You've been avoiding me." "I'm not avoiding you," I replied, my voice steady despite the flutter of nervousness in my stomach. "We've been busy." He finally turned to face me, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "I know. But there's something I need to say." I felt my pulse quicken as I took a step toward him. "What is it?" His eyes locked onto mine, the intensity in them sending a shiver down my spine. "This partnership, this deal we're making, it's more than just business, Emma. I'm not just interested in your skills, I want more than that." I froze, the words hanging in the air between us. "What do you mean by that?" "I mean," he said, taking a step closer, "I'm interested in you. Not just as a business partner, but as someone who could be more." My breath caught in my throat. This was it. This was the moment I had been dreading, the moment when the lines between professional and personal became blurred beyond recognition. I couldn't look away from him, his presence overwhelming me. The weight of the decision I had to make pressed down on me with a force I hadn't anticipated. Should I allow myself to fall into this dangerous game of seduction and power? Or should I keep my distance and protect the empire I had built? For a moment, I hesitated. But then I remembered why I had come so far. I had built everything on my own, without the help of anyone. I wasn't going to let a man, no matter how powerful, derail my success. I took a step back, breaking eye contact. "I'm not here for anything other than business, Alexander. We can work together. But that's it." The silence in the room stretched between us, heavy and thick, as if the air itself were holding its breath. Alexander didn't speak for a long moment, and when he did, his voice was tinged with something I couldn't quite place. "Very well," he said, his voice low and controlled. "We'll keep it professional." As much as I tried to focus on business, the tension between Alexander and me couldn't be ignored. We continued to meet regularly, discussing strategy, making deals, and charting the course for the expansion of the company. But there was always something more beneath the surface. An undeniable attraction that simmered beneath every word we spoke, every interaction we had. There were nights when I would lay awake in bed, wondering what would have happened if I had let him in. If I had allowed myself to fall into that dangerous world of power, of seduction, of temptation, but I couldn't afford to lose myself again. Not like I had with my family. And yet, despite my best efforts to stay detached, I could feel myself getting closer to the edge. The line between business and personal had blurred, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could resist the pull. It wasn't until the deal was on the verge of being finalized that I realized just how much I had lost. The cost of success, the cost of power, had been more than I anticipated. I had everything I wanted: influence, wealth, recognition. But in the process, I had sacrificed something even more valuable: my integrity. And now, standing at the precipice of everything I had built, I was faced with a choice. Would I allow Alexander to pull me further into his web? Or would I take control of my own fate, severing ties with the one person who had become both my greatest ally and my greatest threat? The answer was clear. The decision weighed heavily on my mind, a constant hum in the back of my thoughts, like a melody that refused to fade. I had spent years building my identity, fighting for every inch of success, and now it felt like everything was slipping through my fingers. Alexander Rourke had become the catalyst for a transformation I hadn't anticipated. He was too close, too powerful, and too capable of unraveling everything I had worked for. The morning started earlier now. I would wake up before the sun rose, the weight of my choices pressing down on me with each passing second. The moments I spent thinking about him, about us, were filled with guilt. But there was something else too, something darker, more complicated. It was an undeniable attraction. A pull that I couldn't escape. Every glance, every word we exchanged, seemed to leave a mark on me, a reminder of the dangerous chemistry between us. At work, everything appeared seamless. My team was executing our plans perfectly. The expansion was on track, and our business was thriving. The success I had once dreamed of was now becoming a reality. But as the days wore on, I found myself increasingly detached from the work I had once loved. It wasn't the business that held my attention now. It was Alexander. One day I sat in my office, watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the city. It was beautiful, serene. Yet, it felt like a false calm before a storm. My phone buzzed. The message was simple. We need to talk. Alexander is making his move. It was from Evelyn. I felt my pulse quicken as I opened the message. Evelyn had always been the one to look out for me, the voice of reason when I was caught up in the whirlwind of power and ambition. But her words carried a gravity that I couldn't ignore. I had spent so many months keeping my distance from Alexander, both personally and professionally. But now it seemed that the line I had so carefully drawn between us was about to blur completely. I stood up, feeling the sudden need to move, to do something. But where was I supposed to go? Alexander's office? Evelyn's? The place where I had built my empire? I didn't know anymore. I had worked so hard to get here, but had I really built anything of value? Or had I simply constructed a fragile house of cards, one that Alexander could easily topple with a single move? The rain started as I made my way to the meeting. There was a heaviness in the air, the kind of oppressive atmosphere that seemed to mirror my thoughts. As I stood on the doorstep of Alexander's office building, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap, one that I had willingly stepped into. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had fought so hard to carve out my own identity, only to find myself at the mercy of the very man who had played such a pivotal role in my transformation. The lobby was quiet when I entered, the receptionist greeting me with her usual professional smile. But even that felt hollow now. I no longer saw the office as a place of opportunity, it had become a battleground. Every step I took toward the elevator felt like a step deeper into the web I had allowed to entangle me. The elevator doors opened to the top floor. I had been to Alexander's office countless times before, but tonight felt different. As I walked down the long corridor toward his office, my heart hammered in my chest. The door was ajar, and I could see him standing by the window, looking out over the city. His silhouette was strong, commanding. But something in the way he held himself was different. Tense, almost anxious. "Emma," he said, his voice low, but there was an edge to it. "I didn't expect you to come." "I had no choice," I said, my voice colder than I intended. The words felt heavy on my tongue. "You've been making moves, Alexander. What exactly is it you want from me?" He turned slowly, his eyes locking onto mine. There was something in his gaze, something calculating and intense. "What I want, Emma, is something you've been fighting against since the moment we met. You're trying to play by your own rules, but the truth is, you've been part of my game from the very beginning." I couldn't look away from him. "What are you talking about?" He took a step closer, his presence almost overwhelming. "You think you built this empire on your own, that you've made your way through the world without anyone's help. But you're wrong. Everything you've done has been a part of something much bigger. Your success, your power, it's all connected to me." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my composure. "No, I built this. I did everything on my own." He chuckled darkly, walking toward me with slow, measured steps. "No, Emma. You were always going to be part of this. I knew from the moment I met you that you would be the key. You were never truly free, you're just another piece in a much larger game. The words hit me like a slap in the face. He wasn't just talking about business. He was talking about me. About the way he had manipulated me, pulled me in without me even realizing it. Everything I had done, everything I had worked for, was part of his plan. My heart raced as the weight of his words settled over me. I had fought so hard to break free of my family, of my past. But now, I was faced with the horrifying truth. I wasn't as free as I thought. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Because you need to understand something, Emma," he said, stepping closer. "You've been playing in my game all along. And now you're going to help me finish it." The room seemed to close in around me. And for the first time in my life, I felt small, insignificant, and utterly helpless. Alexander's words were like a poison, seeping into every corner of my mind, forcing me to confront the truth I had been unwilling to see. "I thought I was the one in control," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I was finally free." Alexander's gaze softened, just for a moment, before the coldness returned. "You never were. But you can be. You can still have everything you've ever wanted, everything you've worked for, Emma. All you have to do is accept the truth. Accept your place, my place." The words rang in my ears, echoing back to me like a ghost of everything I had tried to escape. The reality of what Alexander was offering hit me all at once. It wasn't freedom he was offering. It was control. It was power. The same power that had once been so seductive to me. The power to shape the world, to dominate, to make the rules. But at what cost? "How much are you willing to sacrifice, Emma?" he asked, his voice low, almost coaxing. "How much are you willing to give up to truly rule, to truly be free?" I felt my pulse quicken, the weight of his question hanging in the air between us. For the first time in my life, I wasn't sure of the answer. The days that followed felt like an emotional battlefield. Alexander's words had penetrated my mind, leaving me restless and conflicted. He was right, in a way. I had always wanted power, always wanted to control my own destiny. But now, as I stood on the precipice of truly entering that world, I realized the cost might be more than I was willing to pay. I spent hours at my desk, the soft hum of city noise outside my windows doing little to calm my thoughts. I had built my empire on my own terms, but now I was faced with the most important decision of my life. Would I continue down this path, knowing that Alexander had been pulling the strings all along, or would I choose to stand firm and carve out my own future, even if it meant losing everything I had worked for? The tension between me and Alexander had reached its breaking point. We had danced around each other for so long, each of us playing a part in this dangerous game. But now, I had to choose whether to take the final step or walk away entirely. And that was the moment I realized, I wasn't just playing for power. I was playing for my soul. I couldn't ignore the weight of my choices any longer. Every decision I made, every move I took, felt like a thread unraveling, pulling me further into a web I wasn't sure I could escape. Alexander's words continued to haunt me, echoing in the corners of my mind like a constant reminder of how far I had come, but also how close I was to losing myself. Sitting at my desk in the middle of a hectic afternoon, I glanced out the window. The city stretched endlessly before me, the skyline a constant reminder of the world I was building. The world I had always wanted. But was this world truly mine, or had it been shaped by Alexander all along? I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, trying to center myself. The constant buzz of my phone, the rapid pace of business, and the meetings that seemed to consume me were all part of the new reality I had embraced. I had built my empire, but at what cost? Then came the phone call. The name on the screen made my heart skip a beat. Evelyn. She had been my voice of reason throughout this entire process, the one person who had always stood by me, even when the world seemed to be closing in. "Emma," her voice was tense, urgent. "I've been hearing things. I don't think you understand just how deep this goes. You're not just a partner to Alexander, you're becoming the key to everything he wants. You're more important to him than you realize." "More important than the business?" I asked, my voice tight. "Yes," she responded sharply. "This isn't just about the company, this is about control. Alexander is playing a bigger game than you know. He's using you to climb even higher. But if you're not careful, you could lose everything." My mind was spinning. The truth of Evelyn's words hit me harder than I expected. The power I had thought was mine was really just an illusion. Everything I had built, the company, my reputation, was part of a game. I had been playing the part of the independent businesswoman, but the truth was, I had been following someone else's script all along. I hung up the phone, the weight of her warning sinking in. The consequences of my choices were becoming clearer by the minute. Alexander had been using me. Not just for the business, not just for the company. He had been using me to achieve something far greater. The next few days were consumed by strategy. I couldn't afford to be passive any longer. Alexander's game was a dangerous one, but I had played it well. I had come this far, but now, I needed to make sure I wasn't going to lose myself in the process. I called a meeting with my inner circle. Evelyn was there, along with a few key members of my team. I needed to know who was with me. Who I could trust. Alexander had his own empire, his own network of people, but I wasn't going to sit idly by while he played the game. I needed to take control of my own future. "This is it," I said, standing at the head of the conference table. "We're about to enter the final phase. We've built this company into something incredible, and now we have to protect it. Alexander thinks I'm just another pawn in his game, but I've realized something. I don't need him to succeed. I can do this on my own." Evelyn looked at me, her expression unreadable. "Emma, you've built something remarkable, but you can't deny that Alexander has influence. His network is vast, the stakes are much higher than you think, you're going to have to be careful." "I'm not afraid," I replied, my voice steady. "I didn't build this empire by being afraid. I built it by taking risks, by being ruthless when necessary, and by making my own path. This is no different. I'm taking back control, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect what's mine." It didn't take long for things to escalate. The more I pushed back, the more Alexander pulled away. There were subtle signs, meetings being rescheduled at the last minute, emails unanswered, his once enthusiastic responses turning cold and distant. But I didn't flinch. I had learned the hard way that power, true power, didn't come from being liked or adored. It came from making the hard decisions. It came from being willing to walk away from anything and anyone who threatened what you had built. Then, the final blow came. I had been negotiating a deal with a new potential partner. One who could take my company to even greater heights. But when the contract was on the verge of being signed, I received a call from one of my top executives. "Emma, I don't know how to tell you this," he said, his voice urgent. "But I've just gotten wind of something that's huge. Alexander's pulling strings behind your back. He's been in talks with our biggest competitors. Planning a merger without telling you. He's trying to shut you out." The room spun as I processed the news. Betrayal. Alexander had done it. He had played me the entire time, used me to get what he needed, and now he was cutting me out of the deal. He was trying to erase everything I had built. I felt a mixture of rage and cold determination seep through my veins. The time for games was over. Alexander Rourke had underestimated me. And now, I would take back everything I had lost. I met Alexander in his office. The last place I wanted to be, but also the only place that mattered. He was standing by the window when I entered. The city's lights twinkling below him like a sea of opportunities. But there was no warmth in his gaze, no sense of camaraderie. This was war now. "Emma," he said, his voice smooth and controlled, as though nothing had changed. "I thought we had an understanding. We were partners." "We were never partners," I said, my voice cold. "You used me, Alexander. You manipulated me to get what you wanted. And now you think you can just take everything I've built. But you're wrong." His eyes flickered with something. Surprise, perhaps? Or maybe it was just amusement, but there was no hint of regret, no apology. Just a quiet, calculating look that reminded me exactly who I was dealing with. "I didn't want this to end this way," he said, his voice still calm. "But you left me no choice. You're too valuable to just let go of." "But I never wanted to hurt you, Emma." The words hung in the air between us, hollow and empty. I was done hearing his excuses. "I'm not your pawn, Alexander. And I'm not playing by your rules anymore. I'm taking my company back. You can have your empire, but you won't have mine." His face hardened, the facade of calm slipping away. "You don't know what you're doing." "I do," I replied, my gaze never wavering from his. "I'm taking back control. and there's nothing you can do to stop me." With that, I turned and walked out of his office, my heart pounding, my mind clear. I had made my choice. I was done with Alexander. Done with being part of someone else's game. I was going to take everything back, and this time, it would be on my terms. The battle for control of my company was fierce. Alexander had underestimated the lengths to which I was willing to go to protect what was mine. The boardroom became a battleground, with strategies and alliances shifting constantly. But I had one thing Alexander didn't: I knew how to fight without compromising who I was. The final move came when I secured a merger with an international conglomerate, one that offered more than Alexander could have imagined. The deal was finalized with a resounding success, and within weeks, my company was not only safe but positioned to become one of the most powerful players in the industry. But what mattered most to me was not the deal itself. It was the moment I looked at my reflection in the mirror and realized that I had done it. I had rebuilt myself from the ground up, and I had done it without anyone's help. Not Alexander. Not my family. This victory was mine. It was a testament to my strength, my determination, and my unwavering belief in my own worth. I was no longer the woman who had been trapped by the expectations of others. I was the woman who had claimed her place at the top, who had refused to let anyone dictate her future. The years that followed were filled with growth and expansion, but they also brought a new sense of clarity. The woman who had once been lost, the one who had tried so hard to fit into the mold others had created for her, was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who didn't need the approval of anyone, not even Alexander. I had become the architect of my own life, the creator of my own destiny. And in the end, I realized that the greatest power came not from the empire I had built, but from the strength to walk away from the things that no longer served me. I wasn't worthless without them. I was worth more than they could ever imagine,